Hi stock investors, JJ here, welcome back. Well, I've got more on this CrowdStrike issue with global computers that knocked out a lot of computers globally. One of these mini black swan events, a Y2K type of thing, but 24 years later. We've got Dan Ives from Wedbush here talking about the ramifications. I've just made a video about the problem and the CEO talking about it. He did apologize and talked about what the actual problem was, so go and see that if you want to. But right now, let's see some aftermath of this. What's going to happen with CrowdStrike? Has to be said that the stock price is currently down 11.1% on the day, and after hours down nearly another 1%. So this is sort of quite dire, and over the last few weeks it's been going down. So down over 20% so far. So what's going to happen to CrowdStrike? Is it going to be lasting? Let's see what Dan Ives has to say.
To the global computer outage, which is affecting folks across the world right now. It just happened after CrowdStrike rolled out an update last night. Dan Ives just put out a note on CrowdStrike on how they're going to need to go into damage control mode and what comes next. Dan, thank you for joining us. What does come next, and what is this going to cost the company?
Well, there's a black eye moment for CrowdStrike, and I'd say for the cybersecurity sector. Now, the damage, look, it's going to be weeks, months, potentially years in terms of understanding the damage. The big issue is the brand damage, because CrowdStrike today becomes a household name, but not in a good way. Now, look, George and the team, I don't think this changes the long-term story. But other competitors...
Yeah, people didn't know. A lot of people don't know who CrowdStrike is, but they do now. They're reading articles about it, what happened to their computers, what happened to this global outage, and all they can see is CrowdStrike's fault.
Competitors, Palo Alto and others across, they will try to take advantage of this. That'll be a big focus in the sector.
Do you think that there is a liability issue here? Meaning if you're an airline, like an American airline or whoever, where there's a ground stoppage and they're losing money as those planes are sitting on the tarmac, can they go ahead and sue CrowdStrike?
A lot of companies, their operations just came to a halt because of this, including airlines. You can imagine so many out there, so many companies around the world would have been affected by this.
If you're a lawyer for CrowdStrike, I don't think you're going to be seeing the beach this summer. Because this is going to be coming from probably all angles, right? Legally, not just airports, transportation companies. Now, look, Microsoft needs to figure it out from their angle. Now, they're more, I'd say a victim here relative to what happened on the Windows side. So I think less of an issue for Microsoft. Look, for CrowdStrike, you're talking about a company that prides itself on brand. F1, globally, anyone that's seen them at airports. And this is just, look, it's an epic disaster. It's something we've really never seen in the cybersecurity industry at this scale. So this is a bit unprecedented.
It wasn't even an attack of any kind. It was actually a mistake from the company themselves. That was my first thought when I heard the news. Oh, it must be a cyber attack of some sort. But no, it was the company's fault. And as you see there on the screen, it affected airlines. So planes grounded, losing money, as they said, and broadcasters going off air. So journalists won't be liking that and talking about it. Oh, let's get back to Dan.
In terms of the way we were talking more broadly about what happens next and the sort of larger implications of our reliance on the cloud. Do you think this changes anything about the way systems are set up more broadly, about the third parties that are used by a Microsoft, about even the idea of consolidation in these spaces?
Yeah, and after this happens, changes will have to happen. Because the scale of something like this, there will be changes in terms of third-party implementation, updates, not just for CrowdStrike, but across the industry. Because this is unprecedented. And it's not just black eye for CrowdStrike, black eye for the cybersecurity industry.
When you say changes, self-regulated changes, or do you think the government gets involved?
I think it will be self-regulated, but the chances that CrowdStrike gets called to the Beltway for some hearing is probably pretty high.
That's right. The government's going to want to know what happened here, considering how much it affected the world. It's really, for the US, it could go as far as national security risk. What was affected in government computers, would be interesting to know. And the liability here, he said it's self-regulated. They won't want to be making this mistake again. Microsoft might be you can imagine saying, how did this happen? How did this not get tested properly before it gets rolled out? So Microsoft might have to step in and say, we need to, have different levels of testing ourselves before we roll out this third party software that can be rolled out seemingly at will and just cause an error like this immediately.
Yeah, Dan, when you say changes that happen, you mean Microsoft and other companies aren't going to let third parties come in, third-party vendors, and do cybersecurity for them, that they will do more of this in-house?
Well, I think they're going to have to change in terms of the process on the updates. And then just take a step back. Google likely, probably acquires Wiz, and probably one of the biggest cybersecurity acquisitions is reported by the Wall Street Journal. I think this is just... It
was just in the last week that happened.
To push Microsoft further and further to potentially trying to do a cybersecurity acquisition themselves. I mean, they've been around the sort of edges there. Right. But this is something within Redmond, they don't just, go next week like nothing ever happened.
But that meaning that, how do things happen now? Was this a third-party vendor that was allowed to do the update? They sent it internally and it happened, and nobody at Microsoft realized that there was this problem or bug in it, and you think that has to be then happening internally, which is why they would want to purchase one of these companies? And if so...
I don't think they know the interactions between Microsoft and CrowdStrike there, what actually happened. The CEO said that. They're investigating the interactions. So maybe there's some Microsoft fault here. Somebody didn't test it properly from that point of view and just trusted CrowdStrike. I don't think we know that yet.
So who do they purchase?
Well, I think on the Microsoft side, look, third-party updates are common. That's happening on a minute-to-minute basis. In terms of Microsoft, we've talked about they're going to have to look across the industry. Cybersecurity has been something that, normally they have third parties, and they will continue to have third parties, Palo Alto, Zscaler, and others. But I do believe when something like this happens, you look at names like a Varonis, a Tenable, right, CyberArk. Those are names that to us kind of are front and center in terms of, potential acquisition candidates.
Dan, is your sense that this makes it more likely or less that regulators would allow a transaction between a Google and Wiz, for example?
So on that extent, I would view that it would actually be more likely, because I think it shows some of the dangers, in terms of what we see from some of these third-party updates. I also think obviously it depends on the regulatory environment. But this is something...
Yeah, that's true. If they bring it in-house, they've got more control over it. So supposedly, rather than using third-party and have third parties update there with the not proper processes in place, obviously something went wrong here. Something major went wrong here. For it to knock out computers, we're so reliant on computers there. And, with AI getting more involved as well, we'll have to see what action is taken here in terms of what Microsoft does for a start. That in terms of the share prices of the stocks, we'll have to see what happens to CrowdStrike and others in the cybersecurity. By the way, this is nothing to investment advice. There's no recommendations to sell or buy CrowdStrike or any other stock. You need to do your own work on this. Seek a financial advisor just for entertainment purposes. This is entertaining, but this affected people in a real way today. It's the major news. It's the major event of the day. As I said, a mini black swan event, just during a normal Friday.
Something that actually bodes more positive for M&A between big tech and cyber rather than the opposite, because it shows here. And this will be a moment that we'll remember in tech, for decades, to make sure that something like this never happens again. From the gold standard, CrowdStrike. That's the ironic thing.
Dan, can I ask you a question? And maybe it's my naivete. For reasons that seem inexplicable to me, these things don't seem to happen to, knock on wood, to Apple devices. Why do you think that is?
It's the nature of the Mac and Apple ecosystem, because of
they have it in-house. See, Apple does have everything in-house, and they'll acquire something to bring it in-house. Very reluctant to do something in-house, to do something with third-party. They are doing this with the AI, Apple Intelligence AI with OpenAI, ChatGPT, but there'll be a layer there where it's going to ask you. So the Apple's, definitely has a closed ecosystem, which I think Dan's about to say here.
Because of those updates, because everything is controlled within the four walls of Apple Park, and that's why they have 2.2 billion iOS devices. But also remember, Apple very rarely plays in enterprise. Microsoft does. So Apple's less exposed on the enterprise, much more obviously on the consumer side. But that's also why Apple, Cook, Cupertino are in the Mount Rushmore, along with Microsoft and others.
True. Okay, there's more to this. I'm going to leave a link in the description if you want to see the rest of this video with Dan Ives here. I'm going to leave a link on the screen to what YouTube thinks that you should watch next. Also, the algorithm is pretty good at deciding based on your history and so forth. And also, I'm going to put a subscription link on the screen. Do subscribe and give us a like if you've got value out of this video so far. And thanks to everybody for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.